Hello everyone, I hope you're all well. My name is Fionn and today I want to talk about the books that I read in September, starting with All the Broken Places by John Boyne. And it just feels like ages ago that I read this book. I don't know why. I know I started it at the end of August, but I thought maybe I finished it on the 1st or 2nd of September, but I've just checked my story graph and I finished this on the 8th of September, so it wasn't even that long ago, but it just feels like ages ago. But this book is the sequel to The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, also by John Boyne. Oops. Which, if you didn't know, is a children's book, I guess you'd call it a middle grade book, about a boy called Bruno who's 9 and his dad is very high up in the Nazi group. They relocate to a new house in the middle of nowhere and they're originally from Berlin. They relocate for their dad's work and he just knows his dad's very important but he doesn't know why. As the reader, we know that his dad works like almost directly underneath Hitler and they've moved next door to Auschwitz, so it's pretty heavy. Bruno just knows that there's this big fence and loads of people who all wear striped pyjamas on the other side of the fence and he's kind of confused about it. But he makes an unexpected friend. And I don't really want to say a lot more than that, but this book follows Bruno's older sister Gretel, who I think is 12 in the first book, so 3 or 4 years older than Bruno. But she's in her 90s now and she's kind of reflecting on her life. So we've got a dual timeline. She's between her now and her as a young woman just after the war finished. So we've got those two timelines. So we're kind of learning what happened to her after the first book and learning about how she is now. Now she lives in London. She's quite wealthy and we're just learning all about her life. Now, I don't remember loads about this book, but I gave it 4 stars. I know that I enjoyed it. The difference in writing between this book and The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas is just speaks volumes for John Boyne's skill as a writer, because the first book reads like a children's book. You're in Bruno's mind. You're 9 years old reading the book. It makes perfect sense. And then this one is completely different. It feels like you're in the mind of an adult because you are. And he's so clever, the way he crafts his characters. You fully believe their perspective and that you're in their mind is fantastic. And I think that's a really good skill because I think that's hard to do as a writer. I don't know anything about writing, but I think that's really good. I do remember that some of the conversations between Gretel and her father are really quite chilling, so we see them kind of as memories, I guess. Yeah, he fully believes in the Nazi ideals and that what they're doing is the most fantastic thing, and it's quite harrowing to read. I don't think there's not a lot of media that's created about the Second World War that comes from the perspective of the Nazis and the people who thought they were fighting for a really good cause, the people on that side of the war. And that was really interesting, but really, yeah, like I said, quite chilling to read. Overall, fantastic book, 4 stars. You don't have to read The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas to read this, but this will spoil The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, if that makes sense. However, even if you know the outcome of The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, because I feel like a lot of people do after the film came out years ago, it's still worth reading in my opinion. Next up, I read my poll winner for the month, Powerless by Lauren Roberts, which is one of the first fantasies I've read. I've read The Gilded Ones. I'm really sorry, I can't remember who that's by, but I read that a few years ago and really enjoyed it. And that's a YA one. This is also YA fantasy, and we're following Paydin and Kai. It's dual POV. Paydin is, so basically we're in the kingdom of Ilia where there's the elites and the ordinaries, but the ordinaries are supposed to have all been executed basically. They've been shunned from the society because the elites have been led to believe that they are diseased and they'll infect them all if they're around them. But Paydin is this is obviously not true because I'm ordinary and people are fine, they just don't think I am. She's posing as a psychic, which is one of the like low level powers. It's called a mundane power. And then Kai, on the other hand, is the prince, the son of the king, and he is the future enforcer, which I still don't really know why he has that title, but he's the killer, basically. He's the person who, if an ordinary gets found out, or someone gets found out that they've done something really awful, he's the person who will execute them. Oh yeah, that all makes sense, doesn't it? Basically, there's a bit of a mishap in the slums where Paydon lives, and she ends up being entered into the purging trials. So it's kind of like the Hunger Games in that there are trials and they're basically fighting to the death. But there's a series of trials. I think they have 3. People are going to die along the way. Right? Does that make sense? The thing is, the first trial didn't start until page 200, which is quite a long way into a book for the like main plot to start. But then the backstory and the build-up were pretty good, so I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And maybe if the author knew they were going to continue it as a series, then it kind of makes more sense. I don't know, but when the first trial started, I was like, ooh, we're getting into it, and then I was like, oh my god, I've read 200 pages to get to this. Still though, it was pretty good, and I do think it was good for a debut novel. This is a debut novel, isn't it? But it was quite repetitive. Like, we get it, Kai has dimples. We heard that so many times, and I was just like, okay. And the descriptions of eyes were very repetitive and overused. My blue gaze meets his steely grey one, or like that kind of a thing. And it's like, how many different ways can you talk about their eyes without saying anything different? It was just very... It was kind of like they've gone, right, let's not use his name, let's be more descriptive. But they overdid that instead. Do you know what I mean? I really wanted to love this, and I went into it being really open-minded and like knowing that I was going to make an effort to read regularly and for long bursts so that I could really get immersed into it. And I feel like I did. I gave it a good go. But afterwards, I was trying to think about my rating, and I was like, yeah, I guess it could be a 4-star. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, okay. And then, like, yeah, it was pretty good. And then I think I googled which one comes next, Powerful or Reckless. I think they're both called. One's a novella and one's the next full-length novel. And I accidentally fell onto loads of people's reviews, and a lot of people had a lot of the same things to say about me, but were more negative about it. At which point, I think my mind was like, oh, okay, it's okay to not really love this book. And then when I decided I was going to give it a 3.5, I felt way more like secure in that. I just think I need to remember that it's okay if I don't love a book, even if everyone else loves it. However, with all that said, I am going to read the next one and see what I think. Because I didn't really think it was amazing, but I did enjoy it. Also, I found it frustrating when they're like, I hate him, I hate him, I hate him. I think this may be a me thing. Maybe I don't love enemies to lovers, because I hate him, I hate him, I hate him, I hate him, I hate him. And then it's, oh, I hate myself for wanting him or for liking him. And I'm just like, just grow up, you're so immature. But that they are young. But I find it really annoying when there's like back and forth between, you obviously like each other, you obviously are attracted to each other and want to be together and have feelings for each other. Just stop yapping on about it, stop lying about it, and just, I don't know, communicate it to each other and communicate it with yourselves. Process what's going on and have a conversation. I found that a little bit annoying. And then I read a book where I didn't feel that way whatsoever. The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren. Man, I ate this up. I loved this book. I read this for a reading vlog, which is hopefully going to come up at some point. And I've also done like a full-length, in-depth review of this. So I'm not going to say too much now. I'm going to have a drink. Man, I loved this book. And one of the things that I loved about it so much was that they were so straight up about their attraction to one another. Really early on, they had a conversation where they were like, yeah, I like you, yeah, I like you too, but we shouldn't do this because of work, basically. So basically they're making this reality TV show where Fizzy, the main character, dates 8 different men to find her true love match, and Connor is the producer. But early on it's obvious that Fizzy and Connor like each other. That's where the real love story is. But they're like, no, we have this contract, we need to give the show our all, so we're not going to act on our feelings, but yes, we do have them, let's not act on them and see if they go away. Right? How very mature. Love that. I like you, but it's not a good time, let's take a step back and see how things go. That's so reasonable, and yeah, I just loved that. Another thing I loved was the nuances of Connor's British identity. So he grew up in Britain and then moved to the States as a teenager, and it's just so subtle but really accurate little placements of British words, where she says elevator and then you get to his POV chapter and it says lift. Just little tiny things like that, and I'm like, that's so smart. Like, it wasn't in your face at all, it was just there and it was like sprinkled in. Really liked that. The only thing that kind of, okay, actually, the first thing I didn't love was that at one point I found Fizzy a little bit pushy, but I do think she was still kind of respectful, and she was reading the situation, and I don't think she would have pushed it too far, but she was getting there for me just a little bit. And then later on, after they've had their like third act conflict, they're like pining over each other, saying how much they love each other and miss each other. But at that point they started to focus, especially Fizzy, on the physical attraction again. Like, she's saying, I miss him so much, he makes me feel so happy, blah blah blah, and I miss his body too. And it's like, just, you're having a really emotional moment here. I don't feel like that needs to be brought in, but I do feel like that was done for comedic effect, because that is the kind of person that Fizzy is. She likes to break a moment with comedy and humour, so maybe that was done on purpose for that reason, I'm not sure, but that dropped it from a 5 star. It was so close to being my second ever 5-star romance, but I landed on a 4.75 and I am still really, really happy with that. And then finally I read my prompt job book for this month, and the prompt was an LGBTQIA+ book, and I read You Exist Too Much by Zaina Arafat. This is a book about, I believe, an unnamed young woman living in New York City. She's, I think you would say, first generation Palestinian American. So her parents are Palestinian, they moved to the States, and I'm pretty sure she was born there and lived there her whole life, but with fairly regular trips back to the Middle East. So at this point in her life, she's living with her first serious girlfriend in New York City. Her mum doesn't know about her sexual identity, or she kind of does, but they've not officially had that conversation. She knows her mum ain't gonna like it. We also watch her go through therapy for an addiction, which we learn about pretty early on, and then later on we find out that she's previously been in treatment for anorexia. So she has a lot of stuff going on. She has a pretty strained relationship with her parents, and that's reflected in all of her other relationships as well. And she also has a pretty strained relationship with herself. This started off good. The first few pages I was like, ooh, I think this is going to be a good one. But the timelines were just so all over the place. It was really confusing. It would just jump and take me a few sentences to be like, oh, we're back there. So I didn't love that about it. One thing I do really, really love about this is the flop. That is Elite Flop. I also think this is a really good book as kind of a gateway into learning a little bit more about the Palestine conflict and everything that's going on there. If you don't want to read non-fiction about it, you want to keep it into your fiction, it's kind of little snippets are dropped into this, and it's historically accurate, but it does not take away from the story. It's little parts of the plot, and it doesn't feel in your face. It's just there like, oh, when this happened, blah, blah, blah. This is how my family reacted. This is what we had to do. Or we do this because of, or we moved here because of, you know, that kind of a thing. But yeah, I mean, you're not going to learn loads about that subject from this, but always good to support Palestinian authors. I think you're Palestinian, right? Yeah, Palestinian American author. And that's it. Those are the 4 books that I read this month. I am still making my way through On Palestine by Noam Chomsky and Ilan Pappé, and I'm, I think, over halfway now through A Bit of a Stretch by Chris Atkins, which I'm reading on audiobook. I'm in the middle of a vlog and I have an idea for another one coming up, so yeah, I'm starting to feel more confident with doing this. I know it's still silly and embarrassing, but I'm having a good time, and yeah, I just want to do a good job of it. But we'll see what the next few weeks bring of reading and everything else. I am starting uni back up again this month, so reading might be taking a bit of a backseat again, but we'll see. Thanks for spending 10 minutes or so with me. See you in the next one. Bye!